What's up, everybody? Been a while, seeing as we had an early week last week, but I hope you're all doing well. Just wanted to say thank you for joining us again. We got an action-packed talks for you today. Going to be looking at last week, also previewing this week. A little bit of a super stream. I know you guys don't like these, but hey, that's how we're going to get them done today. First, the news of the week was the trades. So for those of you that didn't know, we had 3 quarterback trades this week, and it was unusual. We didn't have a game on Sunday, and let's just say that that day got used. So right off the rip, our first trade, we did know it was coming. So after the loss by the Stallions, Coach McCarron pretty much said he was going to be looking for a change at quarterback, and that's very much what happened. So, thankfully for us, we did kind of get to see exactly what was in store for everybody. So, looking at it, this was kind of a unique situation for the league. Not only did we not have a game on Sunday, which I believe was the first time yet, so not something we always like to see, but where we did have an opportunity was that we have a lot of bad quarterback play across the league right now. So we have a lot of teams looking to make a change. And as it stands right now, we've got 3 teams that are really looking strong for the playoffs, and then 3 teams that could make a shot for that last spot. And I think that's what preempted this move. But right off the rip, Coach McCarron doesn't like to lose. Their first home game, they had a lot of people out there, and honestly, that was unexpected given Birmingham's previous record. But we had 18,000 fans, so really good showing, and they didn't score a point. So you better believe the guy that is known for winning in the state of Alabama had a problem with losing so badly in the state of Alabama. So they acquired Dorian Thompson Robinson, DTR. Pretty exciting for them, of course, but that was something that they had to have known with Matt Corral. Um, they he was a backup for years for a reason, and he clearly wasn't cut out to be the starter, at least not under Coach McCarron. So the Storm have got Matt Corral as well as a defensive end. So really, they kind of won out in this trade, Amani Bledsoe, and he was pretty good for their defense. But DTR should kind of give them a little spark, and we'd look to see hopefully some points at least scored this coming week because they didn't put up a single one, which was almost one of the more embarrassing things of the weekend. But then in another shocking move, and this is where I think Coach McCarron really kind of sent a shockwave through the league. He trades his starting quarterback. Oh, surprisingly enough, the Louisville Kings trade their starting quarterback, Jason Bean, out and Mike DeLillo in, which is a very surprising move to me personally. Jason Bean, I thought, looked good. He was starting to take hold of the offense, and they shipped him off, which I personally not exactly behind such a trade. And then there was another trade we'll get into in a few minutes. But really, the biggest trade is the DTR trade. Matt Corral really was pretty good for Birmingham, but he had started to look bad. And so I get why they wanted to move off of him. But DTR should be good for him. Unlikely that he plays. Jack Plummer really going to be kind of leading the way for the rest of the season for him. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's kind of not impactful, let's say, for the Storm, but ultimately should give a big shock to the Stallion offense, and I'm excited to see how that plays out. So where the big winner is in this trade's got to be the Storm. DTR was a backup, really didn't play much this season, got a few snaps in, but through that process, he did show enough for Coach McCarron to want to go and acquire him. But the most shocking trade to me, this Jason Bean. I don't understand why that would happen. Personally, I think the Kings moved too fast. It was a little reactionary. Wouldn't have been what I would have done. Jason Bean's going to be now a backup, but he should have the chance to develop. And honestly, winner in this trade's got to be the defenders. They may have just found their quarterback of the future when Tom Moo's ready to step away, if he's ready to step away. And regardless, if anything else, they got some trade stock that they can ship off if they need. And Mike DeLillo, it's expected he's going to start. hasn't played much, did play a little bit. The last 2 seasons got 7 games in, 25 for 56. Not great, not terrible. About 73 yards on 17 carries. So he's serviceable, certainly. But I really feel the Kings would have been better served keeping Bean. But on that note, a lot of shock, really a lot of shock going on. Not too many people are in favor of this trade. Uh, so, on that note, kind of a bad showing. And Benny Snell was released by the talk of the town online. We don't know if that's true, but here's a look at kind of this game-winning drive. Jason Bean, here we go. Get him their first win. Oh, and we're going to trade you the next day or later this weekend. So, not exactly what I would have done. It seemed like that was their quarterback. Really was meant to be, but clearly was not cut out. Or at least Coach Redmond did not feel that he trusted him moving forward. Then looking back at that Birmingham trade, DTR should come in, and I'd expect him to really make the offense more effective, if nothing else. And where I feel the reason they've got DTR in there is because I think Coach McCarron thinks he can work with him more, and Matt Corral just did not get it done for him. But the most shocking trade was, well, I guess not the most shocking, but a shocking trade for longtime spring football fans. Spring King Luis Perez, not on the Renegades anymore. Unfortunately, he will be the new quarterback, I'd suspect, for the Battlehawks, and really only traded him for a backup tackle, which I think was a surprising move, but I do not think Coach Neuheisel expected to use the Spring King at all. And on that note, he said, well, let me get something for him. And tackles are hard to come by, so when you can pick them up, you might as well. But we know the story on Perez, really been a consistent star in spring football for many years. And I think last year he really cemented his legacy. There were questions if he was going to make a return, but it's likely that he will be starting in that Saturday game. So, will he know the offense? I'm not sure, but I expect he does get some playing time. Really a shock. Spring King, known far and wide as a Renegade, not anymore. So, we'll see how his future plays out. And the thing is not everyone is really on board with this trade. I think there's a lot of Renegades fans that wanted to see the Spring King make his return to the field, especially with how the quarterback play was last week. And they probably wanted to ship him off just to get, let's just say, a little more confidence in their current quarterback. Repo, he's in for anything that gets eyes on the league. Of course, he was in favor of the trades. There were some questions, of course. How much of this was coach-led, because there is no GM, and then there's regional scouts. So at what point was it kind of headquarters that came in behind this? And here is Sebastian here has some questions. Truly, most decorated quarterback spring football history, just traded for a backup O-lineman. It is questionable. On that note, it is certainly questionable. But his next note about a forced trade by the league to raise the level of competition across the UFL, that worries me. That could be true. I would not be surprised, especially with how Repol's treating it. But we probably won't ever know. Depending on how these trades play out, depending on how those relationships form with the coaches, we'll probably get a good look, depending on that team cohesion. But we've got starting quarterbacks that were just made backups, and we've got backup quarterbacks that were just made starters. So what was the reasoning behind that? I'm not too sure. Hopefully it wasn't the league forcing it, but we'll never know, truly. And then the next biggest news of the day is the UFL's announced where the championship game is going to be. So welcome to DC. That's where we'll be heading this June for the UFL championship. And It's actually got a new name, so they'll be calling it the United Bowl. At least for this year, maybe look to a different name in the future, but for right now, we'll at least know that the championship will be played Audi Field, home of the Beer Snake. If the defender's there, you better expect the biggest beer snake of your life. But I do think a reason they've waited to announce this, one, the idea of, taking the host city to the previous champion, I think it's great. It's a good reason to win, and I think it'll really get some cities behind it moving forward. But at the same time, are they doing this because the DC team is looking so good this year, and they think that they have a good chance to make it to the championship, and they want to make sure it's a well-attended playoff or at least championship, unlike how it had been in St. Louis with the Battlehawks not making it each year. But DC is a nice host. They're going to have the draft for the NFL in the future, and the United Bowl should be nice. It'll be a good host city. Should be hot out there, but ultimately a great time. The Beer Snake will be huge. We know that's going to happen, and if the defenders do attend that game and are competing for a back-to-back or their second championship, I'd really be excited for the fan base. You're going to see a lot of good talent out there, and if nothing else, you'll see probably the skies be lit up. And where I'd be most excited is the city really is behind DC. Mario Bowser really is appreciable because they're the only football team currently playing in DC. That will change in the future, of course. But these championship games are drivers of visitation for these cities. People are going to come from across the league, whether it's to watch their team or just because they're fans of the league, going to come to these games. And I think that's a great thing for the city, great thing for these teams. And of course, Shannon Harris, he's looking to defend his title. He wants to go back. He wants to win that second championship. So the question becomes, will they make it there? And I think right now the team's looking like they're built to do that. We'll see how they play out this week. But so we know the United Bowl, June 13th, it'll be at Audi Field, home of the DC Defenders, home of the Beer Snake as well. Should be a really good time for those involved. Ultimately, attendance has varied. There were previous years we did see a lot of good attendance out of DC, not so much recently, but that will change, especially with them knowing they're hosting the championship, the team's looking better. I think things will turn around, and they'll really be rivaling what you'd see out of St. Louis. And they did put a nice promo together to announce the new host city for the championship. So really, I think the league is hitting their stride right now. They're making good signs, and I think they're really starting to look sustainable. They're getting their attendance up. They're getting their viewership up. It's starting to become more consistent. So I'm actually quite excited to see what's in the future of the league. And another sponsor back in the league. Hey, even if it's owned by a partial owner, hey, we still love another sponsor. So the official tequila of the UFL, Terramana, coming back. We know exactly who loves it. But if you've had it, I'm sure you enjoy it. But good for the league. It's picking up traction. We're starting to get more showing power and staying power. But now let's turn and look at week 4 and kind of recap how the games went. What do we think about them? And what's in the future? So first thing I'll say is we had some weird scheduling, and just like how my streams are, they're kind of inconsistent in our scheduling, and that's how the UFL's been lately. We had 2 night games and then 2 games on a Saturday, no Sunday games. Kind of a shock, especially for football. You really should think that the UFL should be trying to carve Sunday out for itself. Hasn't happened yet, but ultimately they're just trying to get that viewership. We had another game on NFL Network. Not my favorite place for them. I think a lot of people don't watch NFL Network, so it tends to give you lower viewership. But hey, it was a Thursday night game, and ultimately they're trying to carve out a new TV package. They want to sell on Thursday night football games, just like they've sold Friday nights to Fox. Then we had the next game on Saturday. That was on ABC. ABC's been a strong force for the UFL and Fox. Our national broadcasts are really doing well. ESPN also doing well, but the ABC and Fox games are really, really picking up steam. ABC in particular. And I'm a fan of them. The broadcast is really starting to become more consistent, and really I think there's not as many complaints as we had last year. But looking at the scores, a little bit of an inconsistent week. So Kings do get their first win against the Gamblers. Then Renegades, this was almost the most shocking game of the week. The Aviators ended up putting the Renegades in their place and really had an impressive showing. Then one of the best games is a consistent favorite across the league every year. DC Defenders versus the Battlehawks. 28-22. Close game, always will be hard fought, and DC Defenders came out on top. What can you say? Though what preempted all of the quarterback trades we were talking about earlier was the showing by the Stallions. They were at home, didn't put up a single point. First home game of the season had about 18,000 fans, probably the largest crowd the Stallions have ever had. And ultimately, they put no points on the board. So unfortunate, but, that's more a sign of the Stallions than anything else. But the defense is looking good. The Storm was held to 16, which is better than nothing. So I think there are some signs of optimism for them, but we'll see how it goes. Going into our first game, if it'll let us, we have the Kings at the Storm. I mean, not at the Storm, at the Gamblers. Truly a good game, but not always the best for us. But that's quite all right. Are you going to just keep moving? If it'll let us. Yes. Let's check our Kings. So time of possession for us, 32 minutes to 27. Ultimately, the Kings did look dominant at times, but then the defense just couldn't keep it together. The Gamblers were marching down the field. The Gamblers were almost more impressive, but you got to give it up to the Kings. So look at that, 279 yards to 206. The Gamblers were looking impressive, but they just could not keep it together. Louisville did end up running more plays. They had less yards, so ultimately a less effective offense. Yards per play, Gamblers were looking much better. More yards, less plays. Still lost the game, though, and that comes down to a bad showing in overtime. Then when it comes to the pass yards, that's where I think the Gamblers, it was inconsistent at quarterback most of the game. Talia is starting to get his feet under him, but there are questions at the quarterback position. Then looking at the rushing yards, that's really where the Gamblers have hit their stride. They're running the ball well. The offensive line is moving good, but there still always can be some improvement. But let's check out the box score. So Jason Bean, right off rip, led the game-winning drive, of course, or I guess the play. Shipped off, no longer with the Kings, but threw for 192 yards and an interception. I think he's been throwing almost more interceptions than he has been touchdowns, and they've been more consistent than anything else, and that was half the reason to moving him out. Talia did all right, 50% passing percentage, 64 yards, not bad. Decent QBR at 62, but I think Nolan Henderson's the future for the Gamblers. Didn't throw too many passes, he's still recovering. Then looking at the rushing, Kings really should be leaning into Benny Snell. They're not. They don't really have a running back, and they just shipped off their leading rusher, Jason Bean. So don't know what the plan is for them. Don't know exactly how Bean will be used by DC in the future. Maybe there's some, something in store for him, but we'll have to see how that all plays out. Then for the Gamblers, that's really where they hit their stride. Yarns, relatively an unknown name coming out of the first 3 weeks, but really made a name for himself in week 4. Mr. Major, of course, did well. And really, Yarns is who I think we'll start to see with the ball moving forward. And I think he's going to be a more vocal leader, might even become more of a star of the team. Then when it comes to receiving, Lucky, of course, consistent around 40 yards. Their passing game is getting better, but now they've got a new quarterback, so I do think they're going to have to readjust. What do they look like through that readjustment? How is that going to play out for them? That's where I think we'll have some questions that need to be answered. But then looking at the receiving for the Gamblers, just Mr. Hall, Mr. Kirkland are consistent leaders, but passing game needs to get better. I don't know if it's quarterback play and it's inconsistent, but they need to get better if they want to, rise above the bottom of the league, and right now they're not doing too good. But if we go now and look at the Aviators, if it'll let us, which it may not, the Aviators have been impressive. Fan base shows out pretty consistently. I'm optimistic for them in the league, and really do feel that you know they have a future in the UFL. So, looking at it on the surface, they were one of the worst teams coming out of the first 2 weeks, but I think they've really started to tighten up. I think Mr. Haley's gotten a stronger role in the offense and maybe the defense, and that's paid off well for him. So looking at the game, mind you, they did play the week before, but the Aviators get their first win against the best team in the league, and I think that's what sent the most shockwaves across, because everyone thought the Renegades might even go undefeated this year. That's not going to happen. Maybe this is just the one shock for them. Unsure at this time, because they did look rusty. But what I do know is that every team they play for the rest of the league or rest of the season is going to be looking at this film from the Aviators game. How did they shut them down? How did they control that defense or that offense? How did they keep them down just to 2 scores? When you look at time of possession, it might have just been because they were running the ball. They did have a 10-minute drive, and if you look at the difference here, we're talking 12 minutes. So one drive contributed to almost them winning this game, and that comes down to their rushing game. You look at the yards; they had almost close to 100 yards more than the Renegades. 20 more plays, not as effective per play, of course. Renegades are a potent offense, and they probably will be for the rest of the season. The question is can they win games, especially when their defense might not be showing up as best they can? But the Aviators aren't going to win through passing, first off. They're going to win through rushing it down your face. 200 yards rushing. That's impressive. In the UFL, 200 yards rushing in a game? Come on. So the Aviators, I think, have really started to hit their stride. They're going to do this. At least each team is going to try to do this against the Renegades. So it's really, how can the Renegades adjust mid-season? We'll see how they do in week 5. But I think some questions are starting to arise for the Renegades. And how is that going to be handled by the team, by the star players? What's going to happen there? So if you keep looking at this, there are some questions ahead, especially for the Renegades. But when you look at the rush yards, they did try to rush a lot less. But what happens when you're rushing the ball or running the ball is you take up time, and that's less time for the other team to go and score. And ultimately, that's going to have a big impact on the rest of the league or the rest of the game, because you don't have the time to go out there and put up the points that you need. So Austin Reed, 144 yards, 2 tuds, pretty nice, 1 interception. So that wasn't great. But when you look at our QBR, we had 73. Pretty good showing out of Austin. Impressive work, I'd say. Will be for the rest of the season. But, he didn't look great. And I think it's not about him. I think it's more about the Aviators defense. They're starting to come together. The team will be not in the bottom of the league by the end of the season. I almost promise you that. Looking at McClendon, he's really hitting his stride playing. So I'm excited to see exactly what's in store for him. But when you look at how the game was going in the past few weeks for them, McClendon was the primary rusher. But when you look at this week, how the Renegades were playing, you had Lovett going out for 80 yards, White for 43, McClendon getting himself 41, Tawx with 37, and you compare that to the Renegades, Day Hunter, Austin Reed. One, your quarterback shouldn't be your second leading rusher. They really are struggling, and I think the Aviators really put them on notice. Watch us run down the ball down your throat. We're going to be a tough football game. We got the state of Ohio behind our back. We're a tough state. We're going to show you how we play. We're going to play Aviators football. Coach Ginn's leading. They're playing hard. And ultimately, I'm watching out if I'm one of the teams playing against the Aviators this week, next week, throughout the rest of the season. Of course, when it comes to the passing game, star of the game is always going to be Vaughn's. That's that good relationship between Reed and him. But McClendon's really starting to find his stride. Kiki Chisholm getting 50 yards, Matt getting 56. Impressive showing. Toa getting a catch for 8. Not bad. He's going to move that ball around, and ultimately the team, I think, is really going to start to coalesce around their quarterback. And I think as that offensive line gets more in stride, they get that rushing game working. They're not getting so many rushes. Look to McClendon to really start making a name for himself in the league. Then we look at our defense. 11 tackles by Tyler, pretty impressive. 8 out of Woods. Good showing, I'd say, out of each team this week. And like I said, the Columbus fan base, one of the best in the league. Really showing out, coming behind their team, and that makes them play hard. That's why they're winning against the number one team in the league. That's why they're showing out. That's why they're rising up the leaderboards each week, is because we've got a good fan base. They like football in Ohio, and ultimately they are behind the Aviators. But our game of the week last week was the Battlehawks versus the Defenders. Always a good game. Every single year in spring football, when the Defenders and the Battlehawks play, that's the game people want to watch. They had really good viewership the first time they played. We'll look into that again, how that was for this year or this week. But ultimately, this is the game people want to watch. People love seeing the Battlehawks and the Defenders. It's a classic rivalry in spring football, and it was good this last week as well. Looking at 21. Time of possession for the Battlehawks, that's, their offense has questions. That's why they made the trade, I think, really because they were all at the quarterback position. But then when you look at the Defenders, 38 minutes, they're putting up a lot of yards, and they're putting up decent points. I would have liked to see them do more last week, but ultimately when you're playing against the Battlehawks, they're playing you so hard, there's not much you can do. It's only what they will what they're letting you do. And that's something where DC's got to be better, about imposing their will. They're winning games, but they're not consistently dominating. And if they want to win in their home stadium, they're going to have to dominate. So looking at the plays, we almost saw 30 more plays by DC, so they did kind of really run the game. You were mostly watching the DC practice, but the scoreboard doesn't reflect how many plays they ran. And that's kind of a shame for DC, especially with it being home game. But then you're looking at pass yards, 195. Tamu really starting to find his stride. He had been the concern for weeks. He might still be the concern, but he's starting to at least get more effective. And they're starting to become a more dangerous, more potent offense and more dynamic, and they're not just relying on that rushing game. But you look at the yards per pass, Battlehawks did have a few more, but ultimately they have some kind of, big play receivers. So that is kind of contributing them to, making a good amount of progress this year. Then looking at the rushing yards, 111 to 139. So it was actually kind of a little bit disappointing for DC, but they still do have one of the more potent offenses in the league. And then when you look at turnovers, DC did not have one, probably for the first week this season. So a pretty good sign for the Defenders moving forward. And looking at our box score, our passing, Frost, I think, was going to be the number one quarterback, starting quarterback moving forward. It seems like that's not the case anymore, seeing as he did not complete barely any of his passes. But he did get 144 yards, so I think there's good signs there. But we did have one interception out of him, so you hate to see that. That's why they're bringing the Spring King in. They need to compete against these talented quarterbacks, these Tamu types, and not often is that happening. Then when we look at Tamu, 204 yards, really no interceptions. That's the big thing for him this week. 2 tuds, really good showing out of Tamu. Going to start looking like that old Defenders team. So I'm excited to see how they've done so far and how it goes here on out. And with them hosting the championship game, we might just see them make it all the way there. But then when we look at our rushing game, we got Juwan Howard for 85 yards. He did pretty good. It might be leading the team's rushing game in the future moving forward. But then when we look at the Defenders, Deion Jackson really is the one that should be leading Tamu kind of went off this last week. You don't like to see that because that does put him at risk, but now you got Bean as your backup, so maybe you're not worried about that. But Jackson was kind of leading the league in rushing. Now he's starting to take a back seat. It happens, I understand. But if we keep moving, then looking at it, receiving Hakeem Butler, really, really doing good this year. 2 receptions for 109 yards and a tud. He's pretty consistent. Him and Frost had a good relationship. We'll see how that develops with the Spring King. Cornell Powell really made it, coming back, showing why they kept him this year. 85 yards. Really good job. And then Kuti was the one that caught the tud, or at least one of them. So a good showing out of Tamu as well with his passing attack. Then looking at our next game and final game, we've got the Storm versus the Stallions, which the name of the game this season really is going to be the fact they didn't put up any points, especially with it being a home game, well attended, and the Stallions fall to 1-3. Not where a lot of people had the Stallions. They were one of the favorites to win the championship. You look at the time of possession. Orlando really was in control of this game. They had a lot more yards, pretty much dominated in almost every single aspect of the game. Stallions really just could not figure anything out on offense. So you look at Jack Plummer, got 182 yards, 1 tud. Pretty good showing out of him. Matt Corral, though, 83 yards. And then their backup for 60 yards, 7 of 15. So I don't think Coach McCarron felt confident in either of his quarterbacks, and that's why he will look to make a move and bring in some outside talent, because he needed something that was more competitive. He needed something he felt proud of to put on the field each week, and that's not something he had. But then looking at the rushing, McFarland only got 30 yards. It was kind of a bad week for the Stallions in almost every front, and it comes down to their line. Their line is really suffering, and it's holding their team back. But when you look at Corbin, oh no. We're still with us? Nice. So we'll move. Pretty good showing. Orlando really starting to look good, especially as the league continues. Keyshawn Banks, 4 sacks, 12 tackles. Their offense and their defense is starting to look good. They can get better, but ultimately, I'm excited for what's in store for the Storm. Then if we look at kind of our recap and our results, we'll just take a quick peek here, looking at our first game. Louisville got that OT win against the Gamblers, their first win. Jason Bean, 17 for 34, 192 yards. Relatively good showing out of the rest of the league, but ultimately 192 yards wasn't enough to keep Coach Redmond happy, and he looked to make a move. And DeLillo's good, don't get me wrong. Hasn't played this season, didn't play much the last 2 seasons, but we'll see if the Kings made the right move pulling the trigger there. Gamblers, a lot of questions. We'll get into that in a little bit, but it all rides on the quarterback. If they don't have a consistent quarterback, they're not going to be able to win games, but Yarns will give them a chance. 8 carries for 111 yards and 1 touchdown. He's making a name for himself. He keeps that up week to week. I'd expect him to be one of the more dominant faces moving into at least the latter half of the season. Then looking at our next game, of course, we did have Tua there, which was always a good sign. Get some star power to the league, get some eyeballs on it. So that was good. Aviators versus the Renegades. Best game, I would say, of the week. Really impressive showing out of the Aviators. Nobody had them pegged to win it. I know I didn't. I thought the Renegades were going to kind of clean up their mistakes from the week before. That didn't happen. McClendon, though, been a big McClendon fan since he started playing for the Roughnecks. 10 for 15, 126 yards, 1 touchdown. While those might not be the biggest numbers, he's consistent at quarterback, and that's what a team needs. And that's where I think if you can ride on a consistent quarterback, decent offensive line, decent running game, you can go far in this league, and I think the Aviators can go far. Kiki Chisholm, 4 for 5 for 50 yards, 1 tud. We love to see that relationship starting to develop between McClendon and Chisholm. A good sign. Alize Mack, 3 for 3 for 56 yards. We love seeing the tight end getting into the game like that. John Lovett, 80 yards. The offense was looking effective. I'm worried if I'm playing the Aviators this season. Then looking at the Renegades, Austin Reed did not perform. The Aviators had their number. Tyler Vaughn's pretty good showing, 59 yards, of course, but not a great week if you are the Renegades. So tough for them. And ultimately, we'll look to see how the Renegades clean up for next week and if the Aviators can keep this streak going. Because if they can string together a couple wins, they could make a run to the playoffs, and we might see a playoff game hosted in Columbus. And if that happens, we're in luck. We really are. But if we keep looking here, Coach Ginn, very excited, got his first win in his hometown. Great moment for him, great moment for the franchise, great moment for the league. I love to see Columbus coming behind that team, and I'm excited to see what's in store for the rest of the UFL season, at least in Ohio. Then the Defenders game versus the Battlehawks, great game. Key players, of course, it's Tamu, going to be great. Always didn't throw any interceptions. I love that. And he's starting to get his passing game kind of pulled together. And then Matt McCrane, 4 for 4, long of 56. Consistent kicker. The kickers are really the most consistent players in this league and often the most highest scoring. Then looking at our recap, the Defenders really, they had the ball, but not always did they score, which happens. When you're playing against your rival, they're going to play you hard. The Battlehawks, though, I'd like to see them clean up their offense, and with the addition of the Spring King, we'll see how that works out for them. I don't know if they're going to keep riding with Harrison Frost. If they do, Frost has been looking all right, but we'll see exactly what the future has in store for them. Storm versus Stallions. Storm are looking good. Stallions looking real bad. Matt Corral shipped off, so we'll see how quarterback play looks for the Stallions moving forward. But as it stands right now, they may be collapsing in the league. We'll see how they shake it off. But looking at the Storm, they're making a run to the playoffs. I calling it now. They string together 2-3 more wins. They're already there. So watch for that. Especially if they win again this week. That they'll be in for a good showing. But then it was kind of a brutal week across the league, especially when it comes to scoring. But not a bad week for everybody. But then when we look at kind of how the league is kind of shaken out, passing yard leaders through week 4 compliments of XFL analyst. Austin Reed, of course, going to continue leading with 907. Jack Plummer, 853. So he's catching up. So look for that passing game on the Storm to really start to heat up. Then Jason Bean, the third leading passer in the league, is now going to be a backup. So we'll see how that goes for DC. Do they make a move off of Tamu? I think that's unlikely, but we'll see how that goes. Matt Corral, the fourth leading passer, also now a backup. We'll see what happens there. I'm not sure. Jalen McClendon, though, 724. He'll start to climb this list, may move into the third or fourth spot by the end of this week, maybe end of week 6. Jordan Tamu, he's going to climb this week list as well. So it'll probably be looking Austin Reed, Jack Plummer, Jordan Tamu, then Jalen McClendon. Brandon Silver's probably going to start falling as well. So look to see the passing yard leaders change throughout the week. Then looking at our passing touchdown, Austin Reed going to be leading with 11. When you throw for over 900 yards, it's only more than likely that you have so many scores. Jack Plummer's got 7, so he's the closest behind him. And the rest of them, I'd like to see these numbers climb. But we've been seeing a dominant rushing attack. But if you look at our leaders through week 4, we had Deion Jackson at 244. He had a muted week, probably won't this week, so I'd be on his over if you can. Joshua Corbin, 201. He'll start getting more yards over the next few weeks, especially as he starts to establish himself as that number 1 running back. Marcus Yarns, if the Gamblers know what they're doing, they're going to hand him the ball 50 times this week. If they don't know what they're doing, they won't put him in. But I expect his number to possibly rival Jackson's by the end of this week. Jarvion Howard, he'll start to climb. Consistent talent. Day Hunter, I'd also like to see a little bit more out of him. And then Anthony McFarland could do better. Receiving yards, Vaughns is going to keep climbing. Hakeem Butler might make a run to the lead, and then Elijah Badger. Going to be these 3 probably at the lead. We might see a DC defender pop up there, but it's unlikely at this time. Then when we look at our reception leaders, Tyler Vaughns, Chris Rowland, Justin Hall, really good distribution. Lucky Jackson down here with 15. With the quarterback shakeup, I expect these numbers to change drastically. They may not, but we'll see kind of how things work out for them. Then looking at the tackles, Kings are doing well. But is that a result of the teams they're playing having the ball for twice as long as they do? We'll have to see. But let's take a look at our players of the week. So our offensive player of the week, Jordan Ta'amu. He had 204 passing yards, probably his best showing this season. 2 passing touchdowns, an impressive showing out of his receivers more than anything else. And then his rushing attempts, 61 rushing yards. He was the number 1 rusher of the team this week. So kind of an impressive showing out of Ta'amu. He does kind of show that he is still that dominant talent and really, the foundation of the Defenders team. And the Defenders pretty consistently have a play of the week. Then when we look at our special teams player of the week, it's going to be Louisville Kings. They've been recurring talent on this list as well. But Tanner Brown, 5 for 6, long of 59. He's looking great. He is keeping the Kings in games. And really that is a big win for the team, because if you can rely on your special teams players to not only keep you in these games, but to keep you competitive, it's great for them. Then they also had a defensive player of the week. So Cam Gill, leading the league in tackles, I believe, but had 8 total tackles last week in week 4, 2 sacks, 2 tackles for loss. Really impressive showing out of the defense of the Kings. So a lot to be happy about, I would say, and optimistic about if you are a Kings fan. But now I just wanted to offer kind of some recap. So what did we say during our last pregame show, what the headline would be this week? First one was that Aviators fly away on the Renegades. And that's just what happened. They did win, doubled their score in an impressive way. Made the Renegades remember, when you're going to play the Aviators, you're going to play a hard game. So tough for the Renegade fans, but, they may bounce back or they may collapse. And then our bad headline was that the Kings would still be winless, and that almost happened. I really did think while watching that game that the Gamblers were going to take the win. And the Kings, I think, are glad that they didn't. They got their first win. They're going to have a new quarterback, so how does that impact the team? Are they worse? I do not know. But we'll have to see how the team tightens up. Do they coalesce around the new quarterback? Who is going to be the new face of the franchise? What's happening? And I think Coach Redmond is not under his head, treading water, but I do think that the city is starting to ask questions about the team, especially with how they've been performing through week 3. They got their first win, so hopefully we see some more fans coming back, but I think there are a lot of questions there. But now that we've gotten through that, let's look at kind of our overreaction. So our first overreaction is that Birmingham's not winning more than 5 games. That might not happen. I would not be surprised. We'll see how it goes for them. But as shipping off your quarterback, getting in a new quarterback, they may not have any idea what the offense looks like. And you're going to put them out there in week 5 against a talented defense. Yeah, it may not go well for them. But we'll see what happens. Our next overreaction is Renegades are mid-collapse. Now, this, I don't know if this is an overreaction. I'll know more after week 5. But I do think the alarm bells are sounding. Why were the Aviators, a team that was 0-3, able to knock off the best team in the league, especially after they had just played them? You'd think Dallas would have adjusted. They saw the whole offense that the Aviators had, and that was a close game, one of the closest games Dallas had, and you think they would have been better, but they weren't. So I think that's not an overreaction. Then our next one, Aviators making the playoffs. I think that's not an overreaction either. They put up a good showing against the Renegades, and I think if they could do that in the playoffs, they could find themselves in the championship. So if you're a fan of the UFL in Ohio, I hope you're behind the Aviators, because they might find themselves in the championship. Then our next overreaction, Houston might get relocated after this year. I also don't think that's an overreaction. That could happen, especially with how the team's been performing. But I think with the size of Texas, you will end up having 2 teams whether it be Houston and Dallas or Dallas and San Antonio. We'll have to see, but right now there's a lot of questions coming out of the Houston team. And then our final overreaction, two kickers going to the NFL out of this class of UFL players, and I think that is probably an overreaction, but I've been wrong in the past, so I wouldn't be surprised. But those listening, if you guys have any overreactions, feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll swing by them on the way back. But if we look ahead, kind of how things went, so we were looking at our week 4 viewership. We were averaging about 936. So mind you, the last few weeks we were sitting at about 700,000. Kind of on the high end, and now we're getting closer to that million consistent viewership, and ultimately that's what we want to see. Looking at kind of all of the games, you can't win them all. Some of them had more, and those kind of that Thursday night game not as high viewership, but the ones on ABC really were really carrying the league lately. But if we scroll, let's find our attendance. So as we've seen across the year, those consistent games. So Dallas is almost done with their home games, but their memberships their attendance is going down. DC's going down. Houston's going down. Kings is going down. Storm is going down. Battlehawks are going down. Aviators are going down. The real question is, will the Stallions' attendance go down as well, or are we going to see a pretty consistent performance out of the state of Alabama? We'll see how that goes. Might not, but we will see exactly how things shake out when it comes to the fans. But we'll see tonight. But with Birmingham being one of the more stronger fan bases, I was not expecting that. So that was not on my bingo card. So good on the Birmingham fan base. But let's take a look at our power rankings. So what do we have when it comes to how things shook out? So Orlando in the number 1 spot. That's to be expected. Still undefeated. I don't think they're the best team in the league, but I can understand why they would have been placed at the top. DC in the number 2 spot, probably should be in the number 1 spot, but that's where they probably belong most of the season, especially the last 2 weeks. Dallas down in the 3 spot. Them losing that game gave people flexibility to move them, and I think that's probably the most accurate position for them, at least right now. So we'll see if Orlando can continue their undefeated streak, but if not, our middle of the power rankings, we got St. Louis and Columbus, and I think that's an even rank right there. Louisville in the 6th spot, Birmingham in the 7th spot. Both of those have new quarterbacks, so I don't know that I trust that position for either of them, so I'd probably put them under Houston, but Houston's been looking rough. They did lose to the Kings, and the Kings were kind of the worst team. So I wonder exactly what the future holds for the Houston team. They could turn things around this season, but ultimately one of these 3 teams more than likely is holding the 8th spot when the season's all said and done. Hopefully not Houston, but we'll see. Now we're going to switch things over, take a look at our Fox Power rankings, compare those to how things were with our original ones that we were just peeking out. Thank you, RJ. Oh, so we got the Gamblers in the 8th spot, of course. Odds to win the title, 10,000. More than likely we'll get not even in the playoffs. Birmingham Stallions used to have much better odds to win the title. Not the case anymore. Sitting at about 1,400. They probably fall even further down these lists than the Kings. 6,500, not bad, I would say. Though Kings, if they can figure, well, now they've got a new quarterback, so honestly, who knows? I would put them lower than 6. Aviators, probably justified having them in the 5 spot. Battlehawks, justified to have them in the 4 spot. They're 800 odds to win. They're a scrappy team, but with a new quarterback. We'll see how they play out, but, they're still, you're basically starting at week 1 now, and it's week 5, so how is your team going to look, especially when you go against a team that's been playing together all week long? Then looking at the Renegades, they're in the 3 spot, justified. DC in the 2 spot, their odds to win 185, I think, is just, if you're Vegas and you don't have DC with the best odds to win the championship, especially now that they're having it at home field advantage, I think you're a fool. But great for them. And the Storm going to hold this one spot until they have a loss, and then once they have a loss, they'll probably start falling down. But they're a good team, So if you're coach back, you know what it is to be competitive in spring football, and they've done just that. He finds ways to win. He's put together a good team. And that's to be expected. I don't think there was anyone that had any doubts that they would be competing, at least trying to get into the playoffs, and they're got a good chance to win the championship as well. But looking at my rankings, we'll get into here's a look at our week 2 tiers. So this was 2 weeks ago, how things were after week 2. So we had the Renegades leading the way. Then we had the Storm behind them, and then DC. And then we had a big clump of teams in the could be better. And a lot of teams could be better. It was, only after the second week, there's a lot of improvements made. But looking at how things are now, we got a couple teams that are down bad. So we'll get into some of the concerns that I have for a few of the teams. So Houston, quarterback play. It's inconsistent. Your team is really struggling. You've got a good running game by the looks of it, but you just need to really settle in and figure out exactly what does your team, what does the offense look like? What does the defense look like? Because right now there's not synchronous football being played, and I think it's costing them games. Then looking at the Kings quarterback play, what the heck's going on here? Pretty much every team that's down bad has inconsistent quarterback play. I'll just say that right now. But the Kings, they had some of the better quarterback play of the 3 teams here that are down bad. But now Jason Bean is gone. So what is that? Mike DeLillo, what is he going to bring to the team? Is the game going to be better, or is he going to be worse? I really don't know. But I think that they were impulsive trading off Jason Bean. I think they could have held him and probably got some better value from some other teams. But also their running game, pretty much inconsistent, non-existent, and really a big concern for the team. If you can get that running game going, it'll take some of the heat off the quarterback. But now you don't have consistent quarterback play either. So what's going to happen with this team? I have questions. I'm sure a lot of others do as well. Then looking at the Stallions, bad quarterback play. Is DTR going to be better? I don't know at this time. We'll see this week how he does. But as it stands right now, if I'm a Stallions fan, I'm concerned. But then looking at the coaching also, I think, is inconsistent. When your players are struggling, you need to come to them and you need to build them up. And I think that wasn't exactly done by Coach McCarron this last few weeks. And I think, when to win, his team needs to be behind him, and I don't know that they've been. But their defense is a little bit of a strong suit. There's some concerns there. They're inconsistent when they're, stopping teams. But, what can he do? I'd look to them to either be a lot worse by the end of the season or be a lot better. And if they do be a lot worse, I wouldn't be surprised if Coach McCarron does not return next year, but we'll see exactly what the future holds for the Stallions. Then for the St. Louis, quarterback play is a problem for them as well. But their offensive line is where I really, really have concerns. Quarterback's getting hit. Running back's getting hit. What's going on here? You need to have a more prolific offense. You need to have at least a shot to win these games. And while they've stayed in there, the offense really has kept them from winning. I'd say their defense is really holding the game, like keeping them in these games, giving them the shot to win, and then the offense just turns it on them. Aviators, defense is the problem. Offense is really coming together, but the defense has just been pitiful lately. It's like they're not even trying to stop these folks. So, off this win, though, what's going to happen? They looked better last week, but there's these long-term concerns. Is that just a fluke week, or is your team going to start having a more prolific defense? Are you going to start stopping people? Is your line going to get in there more? Those we'll look to see if that happens in week 5. But as it stands right now, they got concerns. Then looking at Arlington, their offense, when the quarterback and passing game is not on the same page and not functioning right, the team basically loses. Why is that? Oh, because they don't have a great running game. So maybe that gets better. I don't know. The offense isn't bad. It just needs to be improved if they can. So I'd say they're balling right now. Don't get me wrong. They're going to win most of their games, but they could get better. Then our almost great team, that's going to be the Storm. Really not too big of concerns with them. I think their defense and offense could play more complementary, but as the season goes on, they work out some of that rust. I think that'll start to happen. So I'm impressed so far with how the Storm's done. Coach Beck, though, is always going to be good, especially in spring football, and he's a consistent coach. He gets his team together and they compete, and that's what they've done. But our team reigning supreme got to be DC. Offense has been prolific. Running game, great. Defense, great. Really starting to look like the championship team from last year. So moving forward, they got to be your favorites for the championship. We'll see how it goes, though. But that's who I'd put my money on. So looking ahead now at week 5, got a good slate for us. Friday night football, Saturday night football, and then 2 games on Sunday. So our Friday night football game will have the DC Defenders visiting the Stallions. Stallions did have a crowd of 18,000. If that shows up again this year or this week, I'm excited. It'll be a good game to watch. Then our Saturday showdown, definitely our game of the week, just given the matchup of talent. We'll have the Battlehawks visiting the Storm. It should be good. Coach Beck's old team, he knows how the Storm operates. He knows Coach Pohl. So it should be a competitive game. I'm excited to see it. Should be a good night game as well. But then looking at our Sunday game, our first game, that'll be at noon, I believe. We've got the Aviators visiting the Gamblers. I think Aviators should, continue their streak of last week. But ultimately, Gamblers didn't look bad either last week. So don't be surprised if this is a close game. And then our final game of the week, we'll have the Kings visiting Dallas. And I think what I would expect most is that, the Renegades look to bounce back after a defeat. And unfortunately, it's got to be the Kings they go against. So could be a tough game for the Kings, especially with a new quarterback. But, that's what happens when you get a new starting quarterback mid-season. So definitely some questions across all these games. I am excited, of course, for our Saturday showdown. Should be exciting to see how the Battlehawks take on the Storm, because if the Battlehawks can sneak a win against the Storm, power ranking is going to look much different going into week 6, because that'll really send some shockwaves through the league, especially with a new quarterback. Is the Spring King going to be ready to perform? We'll see. But our Friday game, 8 p.m. on Fox, it's our classic Friday night football. Saturday, that'll be a 7 p.m. game on ESPN. ESPN just puts us in whatever time slot they can. Not the best, but a night game's nice, especially one in Florida. So that'll be enjoyable. Hopefully there's a good showing of fans. Why not? Good activity on a Saturday. Shouldn't be too hot either, especially at 7 p.m. Then looking at a Sunday game, as I said, noon game, that'll be on ABC. ABC doubleheaders get good viewership, very good viewership. The games lead into each other. Really the way that the league should be showing these games moving forward is ABC and Fox. ESPN, of course, should get a game as well, but maybe a different package, Thursday night football, something more special that they can dedicate time to instead of just whenever they have time to let them in. So that, that happens, but what can you do? Great week ahead, though, for us as fans. So what do we have to look for? Let's take a quick look. So going into our first game, Defenders at the Stallions, Friday, 8 p.m. That'll be tonight. Protective Stadium, that's where they're playing in Birmingham. Jason Bean, we'll see if he gets to play. I don't think he will. But if he does, it should be exciting to get him out there. They might put him in for some sort of special package. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets on the field, but we'll see exactly what happens. But DTR, I'm pretty sure he's going to be starting for the Stallions. So what's going to happen there? Could be a lot of questions for them. We'll see what happens. But I think we know how this game's going to go. And I think most people do as well. Then Battlehawks at the Storm. This will be a close match, and I think the game of the week, of course. If the fans show up, I expect the Battlehawks to have a tough time, but if the Storm can't get more than 10,000 fans out there, I would not be surprised if the Battlehawks are able to have an impact on them. Battlehawks also tough loss last week, so I wouldn't be surprised if Frost or Silvers, I don't know who's going to play at quarterback for the Battlehawks, but whoever it ends up being, Hakeem Butler will be ready for the ball, and it honestly might be Harrison Frost. But maybe they didn't bring in the Spring King to start. Maybe they're going to ride with Harrison. Tough to say. We'll see what happens. But I think this might be the more competitive game this week. Aviators at the Gamblers. I think Aviators should put a little bit of a whooping on the Gamblers, but don't quote me. But key players, McClendon's going to make a big name for himself. Tay Martin, of course, Kiki Chisholm, uh, Zaquandre Wright, John Lovett. They're going to be big names this week. For the Gamblers, Nolan Henderson. Please play for the whole game. But Marcus Yarns, I think, is going to continue his dominance, at least in the rushing game. So look to him to really establish himself as probably the best player on that team, if not the best running back in the league. And the Aviators off their first week, I think they're going to want to continue doing that. Ted Ginn wants to make it to the playoffs, and the Gamblers, they had a tough loss last week, so they're probably going to be looking to bounce back. Should be a close game, but I think the Aviators might have them just a little bit outmatched. Then looking at the Kings at Dallas, Dallas is going to do good. They always do. And then the Kings, new quarterback, can't learn the offense in a day or in a week. So I do expect if Mike does start for him, he might be in for a long night. But the Renegades are going to be looking to bounce back. That's probably the most motivation they've had this season, especially with how the team had performed the first 3 weeks and then performed that way in week 4. They want to prove that they're a better team than they showed. And if they're not, then we're in for an interesting shakeup of the season. But our Friday night football game really should be a good match. We'll see how DTR performs, but ultimately I expect DC to kind of put a good showing on for them. And if DC can put together a good performance, 300-400 yards, then we really will have something to talk about next week, because DC hosting the championship game, going to become everyone's favorite. It's almost going to become a guarantee they'll make it into the playoffs. But, they've had close games. They're not an undefeatable, they are a defeatable team. So I think we're getting some good parity in the league right now, and I think that's something that the league has needed more than anything else. But then we've got a little look from DraftKings, kind of more of a future take on everything. So looking at DC at the Stallions, the original line was 6.5 for the Stallions. We'll look at the new one, our current one, quickly. But Defenders are going to cover the spread pretty much every week, so I'd take them. Best bet, taking the Defenders, of course. Then the Storm, they're favored by, they're given 3. Storm, they've had an easier schedule, so I think they will more than likely cover this spread. So probably, as they said, best bet, taking them. Yeah, you probably should take them. As I was gonna say, we pretty much know how every game this week's gonna go, except for the Saturday game. This one could be a shakeup. They're thinking it's an easy Storm. Probably could. The line's only 3, but the rest of the games, we pretty much know how these games are gonna go. Houston, does have the chance to shock everybody, but as it stands right now, we kind of know how these are going. So 4.5 gamblers are getting 4.5. As I said, we kind of know how this game's gonna go, and of course their best. Oh, they're taking the Gamblers. Really? They think they'll... Wow. So, could happen, Could be a closer game than we'd expect. We'll have to see exactly how that shakes out, though. Then the Renegades, given 7.5. Yeah, you take that, especially with the Kings off of just one week for their new quarterback to train. But then when we look at our money lines, we got 195 for the Stallions, 238. Yeah, you better take DC. Not going to get much off of it, but Battlehawks 130. I'd take the Battlehawks at 130, honestly. And then our Aviators, we've got 185. They've got a strong favor. Honestly, I like the line for the Gamblers. You might want to take that. And then the Kings, 285. Those are pretty accurate odds. Oh, probably watch out for those. But our final little recap that I got for us is kind of like our best week in sports. And it was the Aviator. So if you look there, you got them at, give them 185. Pretty good. And I think they had a great week. That was the headline going into this week, their win, and ultimately a great showing for them. Worst, though, is the Stallions. So you look there, they're at plus 195. Could be worse, but I think that's more a sign of the Defenders, and I don't think the odds have quite caught up. But how is DTR going to do off of 1 week of practice? Don't know. We'll have to see how he does this tonight. But other than that, I did want to kind of circle back, take a look at kind of what we had ahead of us for the week, and give what I thought was kind of more our uh, the lines, I guess, across the league. So current lines now, DC's given 6. Probably going to take DC at 6. Over-under's 44.5. I'm taking the over for sure with DC and the Stallions. Well, Stallions might not put up any points, but DC could probably put up 44 by themselves. So I feel comfortable there. In our Saturday game, we got the Battlehawks getting 3 from the Storm. Over-under is about 45.5. I'm probably taking the under on this. I think it'll be more of a defensive game than an offensive one. But Coach Beck can always give us a little bit of a shock. Then for our first Sunday game with the Aviators and Gamblers, Aviators given 3.5 with an over of 45.5. I'm probably taking the under here as well, and as well taking the Aviators with 3.5. That's a good line for them. Then for the Kings, they're getting 7.5, and I'm probably taking the Renegades. And the over is 47.5. That probably hits. Kings are able to put up points. Renegades are able to put up points. I expect that. I mean, that's the highest number of the week, but I think they're thinking the Renegades are going to bounce back. But let's focus in on some more of our players. So we look at kind of our TD score. Our favorite's going to be Deion Jackson at 190. But I think Deion gets one. Snoop probably gets one. Tamu probably gets one. DTR probably gets one as well. And Deion Kane will probably get one. So that's, good for them if those happen, and for those that may have picked them. But when you're looking at our yards, Tamu's sitting at 250. DTR 250, probably taking the under on both of those. Then receiving, Ty Scott, 100 plus, probably taking the under. Jadon Mickens, 100 plus, taking the under. Rushing, Deion Jackson, 100 plus, probably taking the over on Deion. But all in all, we should have a good weekend ahead of us. Want to wrap things up now with what's Monday's headline going to be? Our tomorrow's headline today, basically. So, first one is DC dominates the champ. AJ's going to get another pitiful showing out of his team, and DC's going to ride off, looking like they're taking the championship home in the UFL, or the United Bowl. We'll see how that goes. Could be tough for him, but ultimately, the chance remains that DC walks into the Birmingham's stadium and puts the league on notice that there ain't nobody stopping them. But our bad headline might be that Arlington slides to the south. They could be mid-collapse right now. They could be losing every week. Could be tough for them. But as it stands, there is some hope, I think, for the team if they can tighten things up. And when I said Arlington, I meant Dallas. I mean the Renegades. But they can't win them all, so tough one. But just a quick recap of kind of how the chat was. I hear you guys. The Aviators are looking good. The Renegades really did get gashed. And the Battlehawks, they messed up. They could have taken Bean instead, and I think they wish they would have. That could have been their starting quarterback. Bean was on the team last year as well. So they could have had him, but clearly not their type of quarterback. But Tamu, not been playing the best. I would like to see him kind of improve. Last week was a good showing. How is that gonna continue in the rest of the season, or is he gonna revert back to kind of that bad showing that we started to know him for week 1 through 3? But should have not traded Bean. So all in all, we should have a great week of football. So only 10 minutes to kick off. So I just wanted to say thank you all for joining. For those of you that may have joined us today, make sure you're subscribing, turning on those notifications. We're going live whenever we can. And ultimately, we want you to participate in these discussions. This league is built for the fans, and we want this coverage to also be built for the fans. But thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend. Enjoy the football ahead, and ultimately, tell me what your game of the week is. Which one are you most excited for? Who do you think is going to be leading the league after this week? I'd love to hear from you. But thanks again for joining. I appreciate your time. Have a wonderful